So everyone, welcome. This is Master the World, and we're going to kick off on 156A today. Madeline, you're up.
Yay, here I am. And I will not forget to remind everyone how to assess color effectively. But before I do that, for those of you who are joining us possibly for the first time, we always put up a few questions for your mind to chew on, if you like. And for this white wine number one, these are things to consider. The type of fruit that leads the wine or drives the wine. Tree fruit, which is what apples, pears, citrus, or other stone fruit, tropical fruit, etc. Any oak influence, which can be tricky, by the way, because if oak is either, just a skosh, is that a Michigan thing, skosh? Just a skosh, a titch of new or no new, and possibly larger, older barrels that sometimes can hide in plain sight. And something that I think is arguably as important as anything else in terms of deductive reasoning is the texture, because that often sets us free in terms of not only quantifying acid, tannin and such, but qualifying it too, being a little more descriptive. So when we look at the color, really the only effective way to do it is against a white surface on an angle. And all of a sudden, it is not just white. It is, a nice, I would say, in my case, in this light, pale yellow, with maybe a few green glints, which, as always, is telegraphing youth. The wine moves, with a bit of weight in the glass. The tears form relatively quickly, but they seem to have some weight. They're not sheeting the glass. So to me, it's speaking of medium body with some, alcohol and extract, more to be defined when we taste it. Aromatically, it is forthcoming. And my wine has been poured for about, I would say, 20 minutes. And it was quite cool, but not cold. The temperature thing is always a dance, because sometimes we get so obsessed with not getting the wines too cold, we don't get them cold enough. And just a reminder, you need some chill for the aromatics to pop. The aroma on this wine is so friendly. And immediately what I get is a combination of ripe, almost sweet citrus fruit, Meyer, lemon, maybe a little bit of grapefruit, but mostly sweet lemon and lime. And then on the heels of that, just beautifully defined, perfectly ripe, both green and yellow or golden apples. So there's a combination of green tree fruit and also riper yellow tree fruit with maybe some Bosc pear action in this also, and possibly a little bit of stone fruit as well. And maybe even a little bit of tropical fruit too, just a kiss of mango, though full confessions, I've been eating a lot of mangoes recently, so I probably have them on the brain. This is the time of year when all our Indian grocery stores have boxes and boxes of them. So I also get a beautiful defined, but not what I would call powerful florality, just like a clear whisper of tree fruit blossom. So apple blossom, also a little citrus blossom, lemon and lime. Very, very pretty. It doesn't drive the wine, but it's a wonderful component. There's a clearly defined minerality, whether you want to call it, that hackneyed phrase, the rocky minerality. I was thinking about this today. In this particular case, it's coming across more like wet rocks or salty sea spray, a little bit of that, but it's very much an important component in the aromatics of this wine. There's a teeny little bit of spice, but not oak spice. I'm not getting any hints of oak, either new or used, but I am getting a little bit of a lactic sense, just a touch, like it's maybe gone through mallow, but let's see what happens on the palate, and I'm getting a lazy smell as well. That's a combination of forthright, beer type thing, and also a little bit of sweet nuts like macadamia. And again, I eat a lot of macadamia nuts, so I probably have those on the brain. I'm going to go
Maddie,
ahead and
Bill's thrown in here a touch of honey. Do you get that?
I think that's probably Bill. I don't think you're hallucinating. I think there's I don't think it's probably not going to be actual sweetness, but there's an illusion of sweetness that's to me coming across like the tropical mango business that maybe could be honeyed as well. But again, don't hang your hat on it in case you're thinking botrytis, or something like that, or actual RS. Let's take it on the palate. But I absolutely see what you mean. It has, well, I think I've described at least 5 or 6 layers to this wine that is clear as a bell with distinctive elements of citrus and tree fruit, a little tropicality, distinct florality, a beautifully defined minerality, saltiness. I don't really get any herbal action unless it's, moving into the citrus zone of like lemongrass, lemon verbena, that type of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and take it on the palate. I almost don't want to let the nose go. It's so pretty. I greedily swallowed a little bit, but what's surprising when you get it on the palate is, whoa, this wine has acidity. Yes, it is medium plus when it's being lazy, but I'm going to define it as high. It is palate cleansing. There's a teeny little bit of a phenolic component to it, but it could be my palate. I'm going to take another quick sip, and this is a Madeline trick. Sometimes, especially on the first wine or two, I will retaste them right away while my palate calibrates to structural components. I will tell you, immediately mirrored are the citrus fruits, which turn actually more tart on the palate. And they are inextricably interwoven with that rockiness, that saltiness. That's such a big part of this wine. The fruit turns more green, so more green pear, green apple, though, the backdrop has a little bit of that tropicality still, very mouth-watering. The florality is there, but it's taking a second or a third seed, and it's fresh flowers for sure. Teeny little bit of organic earth too, maybe in, white butt mushrooms, but I'm searching for it. A little bit of spice like ginger, but I don't think it's wood related at all. I don't think this wine has seen even neutral oak. The nuttiness comes up, as does the beery component too, speaking to Lee's contact. I think it is mid-palate too, if you hold it. Even surrounded by all of that mouthwatering acidity, there's a creamy mouthfeel to it, mid-palate, that speaks to probably malolactic, but also Lee's content. It is long, it is mouthwatering, and the quality level is high. If I had to typify the texture, I would call it lean and tart, though it's sort of not doing it poetic justice. Acidity high, alcohol medium. It doesn't pull my attention. You could push it to medium plus if you wanted to. I don't think it is. Phenolic component is minor, just a titch, and the finish is very long. Yay, good wine. Thank you, Evan.
All right. So I'm going to launch the first poll, and we can talk about.
Swallowed it. Very good. Okay, what do we have option-wise here? And please, by the way, a heartfelt, enthusiastic reminder that when you vote, it is anonymous, and it's very helpful to your brethren and to us if you vote. And if you really think it is other, rock on and put it in the chat room if you wouldn't mind. I hope you guys are keeping an eye if there are any questions coming up, because I haven't.
For sure. Don't worry.
I've just been seduced by the wine. Sorry about that. So we have options of 2, what we call, I hate saying neutral. I'm going to say non-aromatic or not strongly aromatic grape varieties, Chardonnay, and then Pinot Grigio, which are often confused from one another, especially if they haven't seen any new oak, and then Chenin. where acidity comes into play big time. But just remember that Chenin, ranges from moderately aromatic to highly, depending on its specific incarnation, and can on occasion be mistaken for Riesling. Also, it tends to run into stone fruit land. Region-wise, France and Italy, for the obvious Chardonnay, Pinot Gris, Grigio, and Chenin in France, though South Africa's tucked in there for Chenin too. And those of you who haven't experienced old vine South Africa and Chenin, it's affordable, it's around. Don't you cheat yourself by not experiencing it. Thanks to Evan, I've had a chance to, and they're mind-stopping. Oregon Pinot Gris, and Chardonnay, actually. Again, much like Napa and I think Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc, Oregon doesn't plant a lot of Chardonnay so that Pinot Noir can have its day in court, but I love Oregon Chard. So this is very interesting. We are literally neck. Yeah. Oh my God, I've never seen this.
So you've Absolutely. Got a third, and a third.
And then
your other is Albarino.
Oh,
so
fantastic.
Let's start there, Maddie. Let's talk about why it's not Albarino.
Well, let's say if it could be, what would be the defining, certainly Albarino can have high acidity. Certainly Albarino is most of the time unoaked. Certainly the florality would lead. So that would be the only thing I would say for me. If it was typical, you hate to use that, but let's say a really exuberant expression of Albarino, I think the flowers would be pushier, but I can absolutely see why someone would think that. How are we on Europe versus non-Europe? We are split nicely, though. Yeah. France has got, there are a lot of people taking that boat. And I can understand why, because even if you're in Chenin or Chardonnay land, you'd be going there. The reality is, I'll use the phrase that I'm practicing using. Can the New World have a strong mineral component? Absolutely it can, but quite often when it's a classic expression of a grape variety and you have this much, you want to meditate hard and fast on whether it is from Europe. I will say Chardonnay and Pinot Grigio can be, a little bit of a dance. But generally speaking, Pinot Grigio, especially if it's from a place like Alsace, will have perhaps slightly less compelling acidity. Though the tree fruit expression and other elements can be very similar, especially to unoaked Chardonnay. We're leaving Evan's house. Yay. We are taking a leisurely trip, and we are definitely leaving North and South America, and we are indeed going to Europe. I will tell you that I think this is a memorizable example of what this is, which is Chablis. It is a beautiful modern example of Chablis. It is fruit forward, but the other classic elements are there in full force. This is interesting. This is Domaine Louis Moreau, because some of you may have seen that or maybe more familiar with Moreau Père et Fils, which is their négociant firm. But as starting in the mid-1990s, the family purchased a sizable Chablis estate, 125 acres. So this is Domaine Louis Moreau. Quite a bit is produced of this wine from about 50 plus acres in Chablis, just to remind us all, is Burgundy, though it's geographically disconnected a bit, and it has just this glorious terroir, of which this wine is such a good example of, where you get that flintiness, however you want to define it. If you are not hip to how cool Evan's little descriptions are when you click on, what is it? The profiles. I'm going to read this to you because it's masterful. Chablis, the whole business about Kimmeridgian, a combination of clay and namesake limestone. Essentially, this area was an old seafloor. The soils are chalky and minerally punctuated with fossilized seashells and fragments of marine skeletons. Now, this is Chablis Village, correct? Not Premier Cru or Grand Cru. The Premier Crus and the Grand Crus are split on either side of the river, but the Grand Crus are in one little bank together on the northeastern side of the river. So, you know, Chablis Village generally has more of the Portlandian limestone that doesn't have the fossilized sea critters in them. However, you know, this has plenty of minerality to define it. I think it's a beautiful example combining the tree fruit, the chalkiness, the acidity, that lees expression, little bit of mallow, right? That creamy mid palate. Honestly, if you're trying to memorize modern Chablis, because yes, global warming has changed the scene in terms of not only areas like Chablis, but let's say Sancerre. I'm sure those of you who belong to tasting groups, I just experienced that this morning. They're not, you know, what they were 10 years ago. They're different. This goes to 100% mallow. Here is the young Monsieur Louis Moreau, who I have to tell you went to school at Fresno State. Isn't that you know,
That's
you gotta
cool.
love the global village. And he worked with enthusiasm at several California wineries before going back and telling his dad, I'm ready, and nudging him, you know, to let him run. About 10,000 cases of this wine is produced, and I like to mention that because this is Domaine Chablis from a very deft hand, not a tiny amount produced. They are into native yeast. They do lees aging, but not batonnage, so they're not overworking it. And again, I think the combination of minerals, citrus, chalkiness, and tree fruit is just a beautiful example. Do my friends want to jump in with anything additional?
Tim, you want to jump in first?
Yeah, I don't have much to add, Maddie. Great job on that. It's delicious, you know, and like you say, it checks all the boxes for Chablis. Just to Bill and Jerry were mentioning, you know, something about Albarino, and I put for everyone a comment in the chat just saying Albarino is floral, semi-aromatic grape. It's got high acid like Riesling, and it's got least contact, and it's got phenolic bitterness. So here,
phenolic bitterness, right?
Yeah, un poquito floral, as we would say in New Mexico, with high acid. Really profound minerality, but the fruit forward stuff you get in Albarino and the flowers are not there.
And the lack of phenolic, you know, strong phenolic expression, correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely. Yeah, and Albarino too can be softly what they say terpenic, picking up on things like that. Just a couple of closing thoughts, and then I'll jump into wine too. It is important that Madeline alluded to it, particularly when you're in Burgundy, because of going back to Napoleonic laws and splitting up the land and doing all these things. Oftentimes in different villages or areas, you're going to find like 15 people with the same name. If you pick up a phone book in Chablis, I suspect the Moreau page would go on for several pages for those of you who remember phone books and doing that. So it's oftentimes worth digging a little bit and not assuming necessarily that the Moret is the same Moret or the Moreau is the same Moreau, etc. Because oftentimes there'll be another part of the family. One part of the family might be really good. The other part of the family might be coasting a little bit, but this one is a great example. Two other things to add. Number one, I noted too, and you know, we talk about the smell and the elements of minerality and wet rock and stone and perhaps a kiss of salinity and all those other things. I also, particularly for wine hasn't spent any time in oak, will always get minerality texturally as well too. It's sort of almost a chalkiness in your mouth, which we can argue is a little bit phenolic too, and that can be from some skin contact and all that too. But for those of you who are old enough to remember clopping erasers by the blackboard and then sucking it in a little bit into your mouth, and you get that film there, that's what minerality does in wines. And then lastly, on global warming and stuff like that, not only is it harder to find Chablis that doesn't taste like, you know, dull fruit cups anymore. A lot of them are starting to get that way. Part of it being, as Madeline pointed out, locationally, but other varieties too are changing. You know, it's hard to find Sancerre that has green pyrozinic characters, but the benefit is to other areas. Like I've been drinking a slew of muscadets recently, and for a wine that used to be lean, mean, and void of any pleasure whatsoever beyond the fact that it happened to go well with oysters, go back now and check muscadet in some of these warmer vintages and people who are treating their wine, if you will, in a more Burgundian fashion on that Melon de Bourgogne grape, and start to see some incredibly complex wines coming from truly the Western Loire, closer to Brittany, really, than you are to Anjou or something like that. But bravo, it's always hard to follow.
That. I was never a Muscadet fan, but over the last couple of years, I have changed my tune without oysters,
Yeah,
says the vegan vegetarian.
Not true of Gros Plant, I would add. Still pretty Gros, right? So, but let's move on to wine two. Although it is always hard to follow Madeline, I sort of feel like I used to say that Smokey Robinson could just read the phone book and it would be as gorgeous as any of his Motown music. Following Madeline on any wine description is always really, really hard. So I will do my
Too
I will do
kind.
my best once again. Pick up glass of wine two and look at it against your background here. As Madeline pointed out, always tilted at an angle. It's kind of like a pool. There's a shallow end and a deep end. And it's important not only to note the color, but note how we are between Madeline, the second one too. So on wine number two, I'm looking at mine side by side. I'm getting a bit more color extraction, a deeper color than Madeline had, but I would still keep it kind of in the yellowish vein of things. The tears, as I swirl it around, forming kind of medium S, maybe medium plus, but they're a little bit secondary there, but it seems like it's got more viscosity and texture. There is a kiss of green tinge there, which, as Madeline mentioned earlier, always suggests you either young wine or potentially cool climate or the combination of both. Oftentimes it can be a little bit of both that's giving those to you, and everything is correct. Nothing doing the backstroke, nothing doing the breaststroke in there. So we are set. Wine looks sound. Giving it a sniff, and always looking for a few things: fruit terms, earth terms, wood terms. I find that I am dominated here by fruit characters. There are certain non-fruit characters there, probably more in the sort of herbal note, if anything, but it really is very much of a fruit-driven wine, and a very primary wine at that, which is to say, not a lot of developed flavors, not a lot of vinosity, not a lot of anything like that. I am getting a bit of citrus too, but riper citrus than what we saw before. Madeline's was more lemony. This to me comes off more sort of tangerine-y, orangey. You don't get those sort of shrill notes of almost kumquat or loquat that you have in the first wine that really permeate the wine there, but they are definitely on the riper side. So if it is lemon, it's Meyer lemon, but like I said before, generally riper citrus. There is a crispness to the nature of the tree fruit there, which tree fruit is dominant. I am getting green apples. I am getting yellow, golden types of apples. I am getting green and yellow pears, perhaps not as rich as brown pear, but they're sort of bright, crisp, perfumed, and lifted and dominant. There is some stone fruit here, a little bit of perhaps nectarine, maybe a scotch, to use a Maddie term, of white peach in there as well too. And then there is the tropical. The tropical to me is what comes in like the wave hitting the shore. And I'm getting a good amount of pineapple here. I'm getting some papaya. I'm getting a little bit of both Crenshaw melon and a little bit of cantaloupe here. That is then framed appropriately by blossomy white flowers, sort of again, appley blossom flowers, a little bit of citrusy blossom flowers. And then there's this sort of note, and again, we talked a little bit about this earlier, I think Jerry brought it up. There is sort of a honeyish thing, but to me, it's more like honeysuckle, the flower, not actually honey, the stuff that comes from the bees. But very, very buoyant, very lovely, a little bit of maybe candied ginger in there, and pretty. As far as earth goes, nothing dramatic. You know, maybe there's a little bit of turned dirt in there, but coming off of wine one, go back and remind yourself of it if you need to. No minerality, no salinity, no stones, no graphite, no anything that, you know, petrol, nothing like that. So maybe just a little bit of just inorganic earth. There's nothing that really suggests wood to me on this wine. There is a little bit of nuttiness, a note of, dare I say, like honey nut Cheerios or something like that. But that to me suggests a little bit more about lees contact and the nature of the core element of the varietal fruit. So fruit covered, earth covered, no real wood to speak of, and a little bit of herbal things there. Maybe a bit of chamomile, maybe a little bit of yeah, mostly chamomile, maybe a little bit of verbena, but it's really driven by this sort of very strong fruit character.
There's a question here from Marshall. Did you get any petulance, any bubbles in it?
I did not. I did not on wine too. But it's quite possible that depending, again, as the bottling process goes and individual bottles are bottled bottle to bottle, you might hit a bottle that had been spritzed with a little bit more CO2 for freshness, and it might get captured during the rebottling process. But I don't pick up any, and if it is, it's not a defining character of the wine as well. It's probably more reserved for just maintaining freshness. In the mouth, It has definitely got some roundness to it. The palate is a little bit on the creamy side. The acid is very bright. It is a racy wine. I think that's in part both combination of youth and combination of the nature of the variety. The alcohol level is probably somewhere medium, maybe medium plus-ish, both in terms of length. It's also on the longer side. It is at once tart. So if I had to characterize this wine, it's probably more lean and tart than it is creamy and round, and it's very persistent in a very defined sort of way. Varietally, what do we got choice-wise? We've got a handful of different directions. We have Chenin Blanc, which we talked about before, and Madeline did a really good job sort of speaking to what that's all about. See if this fruit profile or any of the other elements sing to you that way. We covered off on Albarino and Alvarinho quite well. Important to draw the distinction. Albarino on the Spanish side, Alvarinho on the Portuguese side, and they do reflect certain differences. The Albarino's being a little bit more terpenic, the Alvarinho's being a little bit leaner and sharper. But don't forget, Albarino becoming the #1 white grape of Uruguay today, kind of somewhere in the middle. And then Rhone blends too, and this could be Viognier driven, it could be Marsanne driven, Roussanne driven, or some combination there, or of course all of your others. We do encourage you to vote. Of course, try and mix your thinking of variety with region, and we can talk about it and address any conversations there. Vote early, vote often, prepare yourself. Fall is not that far away. You want to get into voting mode. Do not stay home this year for whoever it is that you care to vote for on whatever part of the ticket, but get in there and vote. You can't complain if you don't vote. So how are we, Lee Manager? Are we ready to explore?
I think yeah, people were ready to vote on the last one, but they're a little slower, a little bit more confused on this one.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Lock in your vote. There you go. Poll is over.
So we have 56% thinking that it's Chenin, and 11% at Albarino, and 33% at Rhone blend.
Yeah. Cool.
And looking at old world versus new world, or Europe versus not Europe, I should say 55%.
We're
so
split.
Yeah, not very convinced.
Yeah. Well, and I think that can be true of both the fact that the world is getting smaller, that things are maybe not as quite as distinctive as they used to be, but also it could be part and parcel of the combination here. So I do think this wine does tick a lot of the boxes, indeed, specifically to the lead dog there. I do think there's reasons why it's probably not Albarino and not Alvarinho. Florals are not strong enough. You're not getting as much of that stone fruit and stuff like that. But nevertheless, we're going there. And then as far as,
we have a problem with the video, so I'm going to skip to the results when we are ready.
Okay.
So you just tell me when you're ready. I can't.
Don't worry.
The video can't show. I'm not gonna. Yeah.
Don't worry about showing. Let's do the results, and I'll talk about it. I'll pick it up along the way.
Yep.
Tech, friend, and foe. Right now, it's playing foe on us, so we'll do that. But be happy we're not dealing with cybersecurity right now. Our entire site could be shut down, right? So here we are. We actually are in Chenin Blanc land. We are in California, and we are specifically in the area of Clarksburg, which is sort of the northern part of the Delta, not too far away, as you can see on the right side of your map from Lodi. When we think of this part of the world, we think about it primarily for the red varieties. We think about it for Old Vine Zinfandels. We think about it for Mourvedre. We think about it for Iberian varieties, and not so much for white grapes, although there is a lot of interesting white Rhone grapes there. So those of you who voted white Rhone, I think texturally and all that, you're not completely off. But this is Chenin, and specifically from Clarksburg. Now, Clarksburg is an area that is considered really one of the epicenters for Chenin Blanc today, and really just an amazing job. And I think the flavor descriptors that we used, that I should say I used to describe that, really resonate on what that is all about. This is a wine. Now, I've always been loath to put celebrity wines into the mix, but this is a celebrity wine that's actually quite good. So 3 by Wade here. Wade is in fact Dwayne Wade. And for those of you who are hoops fans, basketball fans, you know this is a gentleman that, along with LeBron James, who played with LeBron James.
3-point shot.
Yeah, 3-point shot. Hence the 3 by Wade, one of his great hallmarks, but has been one of the people within the basketball community who's really made wine part of their vernacular. I'm trying to push it in baseball, but they're doing a good job in basketball. Not only is Dwayne into it, not does he participate with his winemaker in chief, Jason Paulmeyer, in putting the wines together, but he's done two things. One, he's put his money where his mouth is. He sits on the board of directors of the Enology and Viticulture Department at UC Davis, so he's really, truly into this. And secondarily, he likes to keep his wines affordable. This is not, Domaine Curry at $400 a bottle, but this is a very affordable Chenin Blanc that sells for closer to like $20-ish, depending on what market you're in. He's a great guy. Jamie Watson is sort of the I don't know, he's like the partner. Jason makes the wines, Jamie's his partner, and Dwayne is sort of the man. And he does a really good job. I do want to point out that while everyone's sort of thinking about Chenin Blanc in California as being newer, long before there was Chardonnay, if you went up to the wine country in Napa Valley, it was mostly Colombard and Chenin Blanc. And in fact, very much the same sadness we have about a lot of old vine Chenin Blanc getting ripped out in South Africa, we find the same thing to be true in Napa today, and there's not a lot of it. So today you are looking to other places, most notably Clarksburg, for that. So they do a good job. I think this shows really what the potential can be with this sort of comeback kid, Chenin Blanc in California, led by places like Clarksburg and all that. And I hope this gives you great confidence that even if you're a celebrity, but particularly if you're an athlete, they seem to do a better job than the actors and actresses do. You can make really nice wine. He also makes really good Cabernet too, which we've used before.
And then is it true that because they used to have a lot of French Colombard and Chenin, the vines are older, or?
Yeah, the ones that are still left are older vines. So you can find old vine Chenin Blanc. But boy, the people who I would think of, Lang and Reed makes a good one, Cousin Westra makes a good one, that are in fact literally made out of 40 and 50-year-old Chenin Blanc vines. And as we've learned from South Africa, where the price per ton of old vine Chenin Blanc is the most expensive white wine grape out there, it is a grape that does very well with vine age. Obviously, the yields drop, but the concentration becomes richer. The flavors become more pronounced, more vivid, if you will, and just tasty.
Awesome.
Okay. Yeah. Well, everybody. So we're on to wine number 3. And questions considered before we get started. So take a look at the color. And it probably has the lightest color of the first 3 wines, certainly the white wines. Yeah. I call it a straw color with green. And what does that mean in terms of the wine's age, but also winemaking techniques and lack of things? Next up, what are the important non-fruit aromas and flavors? That's always a question I ask. And then how would you describe the structural elements, specifically the acidity, the alcohol, and other things too? So keep those questions in mind. With that, let's take a look at the wine first, and let's do the visual aid. So white paper, and we got your glass holding up, and you can see it's, compared to the other 2 wines, it's got less color. So it's a true straw color. It's got green, maybe a little silver to it. What else? There's no bubbles, and we wouldn't, bubbles in wine like that, like 2, I had some bubbles. Who was that? Marshall, I think, was asking. And that's just dissolved CO2 in the wine. That was probably added to it at the time of bottling and rebottling. Okay. It's a preservative. All right. But none of that here, no sediment, no tartrates, none of that stuff. And as we swirl the glass, or if you want to do that and upright it, yay. Interesting, because in my glass, everything's sheeting and there's really a lack of tearing. What could that mean? K, as we say in New Mexico. Okay, and we'll find that out. All right, on to the nose. Everybody smell it, please. Oh my goodness, that smells yummy. Technical term. Okay, so we'll start with the fruit. There's a lot of fruit here. And I'll start with citrus fruit. So there's both sweet and tart citrus. There's lime, there's key lime, there's mandarin, maybe some Meyer lemon, and some pink grapefruit. So most of it is sweet citrus, but there is some tart citrus too. Orchard fruit, as in apples and pears, mostly green apple, green pear, maybe Fuji, but it's mostly on the green, really tart side. And then stone fruit, pit fruit, is a big thing here. And I've got white peach and white nectarine, and maybe a little yellow nectarine too. Tropical fruit too. There's pineapple, there's kiwi, and what else? Maybe a little mango, just for you, Madeline. Madeline, I want you to know the best fruit I have ever tasted, the most delicious. I was in Taiwan one time, and they had little pink mangoes that were just out of this world. Okay?
Did you have 4 of them?
Oh man, no, I had way more than that. So yeah, they were incredible. What else? And there's a little bit of green melon. Okay, so what I just threw out there was all the fruit groups for white wines, right? And that should just, put that as a marker in your internal IMAX theater, because for me, there's one or two grapes that do that, two specifically. And we'll talk about that after the fact. Going to non-fruit, there's floral, there's honey and honeysuckle, a bit of the glass, and there's some really pretty citrus blossoms like lime blossoms. There's just a touch of what I would call little botanical type themes. So there's a little lemon verbena and maybe some lemongrass, but really it's not herbal at all. What there is instead is there's some profound minerality here. So there is some just stone minerality of some kind that's very strong. There's also a touch of sulfur. I'm pretty sensitive to that. And there's a touch of something else along with that. So there's kind of a package deal when it comes to the minerality. And I won't mention the other thing because all of you would jump to conclusions and suffer contusions, as they say in somewhere. Anyway, what there is also is the complete lack of oak. Maybe oak was used here, but this smells like either large oak uprights or stainless steel, or maybe a combination. Okay. All right, let's taste the wine. I have high expectations. I don't know about you. Okay, I said yum on the nose and 3 yums on the palate. This is like an adult sweet tart. Yeah, so to point out the obvious, first thing is there's some residual sugar here. This wine's slightly sweet. But notice, everybody, we're going to get back to that in a second. Let's do the confirmation first. So yeah, the fruit here now turns more tart than sweet, although it's both. I still got the key lime, the lemon. There's a little bit of lemon now on the finish. Lime, more yellow group than grapefruit than pink grapefruit. Definitely white peach and white nectarine, and they're tart, And what else? Green melon, still tropical fruit, underripe pineapple, some mango. Yeah. And then now go ahead and take, this is for science, take another sip again. I want you to pay attention to a couple things. What happens to after the initial impression of fruit and also the sweetness? Pay attention to what happens with residual sugar as the wine goes across your palate, because something does happen. So we're looking for 3 things. That's a lot. Let's stay with me, okay?
Do I have to spit it out? I'm going to swallow.
All right, first of all, let's deal with the residual sugar. Notice most of the taste receptors are towards the tip of your tongue and in front of your mouth, but they're all over, right? Notice the wine gets drier. What causes that? Acidity causes that. So the acid, just to jump ahead, the acid here is high. It's higher than you think, which means there's more residual sugar than you think. The two do a dance. They kind of press against each other. The fruit does turn tart. And then on top of that, after that initial blast of all that lovely fruit, the mineral kicks in, and it's really the centerpiece of the wine. Okay, it's like sequentially, you get all the fruit and then this mineral, and it's like a mild electric shock. It's all over the roof of my mouth. And then the acid kicks in, and you notice that really drives the finish. The finish is quite long. But one more thing, and you can do it now, or you can take another sip of wine. I'm going to do it. Is say, oh, and inhale, but only if you don't have wine in your mouth, because, we don't want to Heimlich you. Of course, we can't do that. But notice that the alcohol is kind of MIA, right? The alcohol's low here. Yeah, it really is. And that explains, maybe the residual sugar, but also the tart character of a lot of the fruit. All right. What else about it? We didn't think there was any oak on it. If there is oak, it's larger uprights. Doesn't taste stainless steel to me. I think of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc when I think of stainless steel, and it's not quite the same texture. It's more rounded, even though it's got the acid. The finish is long. The complexity is medium plus. Okay, so here are your choices. So vote for either Riesling, Chenin Blanc, and Torrentes, right? So there you've got all 3 of them, semi-aromatic grapes, especially Chenin Blanc and Torrentes. In terms of your place choices, origin choices, you got Germany for Riesling. And then you've got France for either Riesling or Chenin Blanc, Riesling from Alsace and Chenin Blanc from the Loire. Argentina for Torrentes, Salta. And then Australia for like all of those, because they grow everything in Australia. Okay. All right. So after the fact, we'll talk about why it is the way it is and all that good stuff. I like what Marshall just said. Minerality is expressed as licking a tin can. Yeah, that's actually pretty good. I was actually one of those weird kids, and I'm sure you know that already, but I was one of those that I sucked on pebbles. My mom was always worried that I was going to choke. But that's what it reminds me of, is having a pebble in your mouth, right? All right, so
I'm going to
let's,
end the poll. I'm going to share the results. We've got 75%
yeah,
on Riesling and 25% on Torrentes.
yeah. Now, of course, nobody went to Chenin Blanc because they know Evan wouldn't be that cruel. You wouldn't do that to Evan, would you? Just
I don't
asking for a
know.
I
friend.
don't
Okay,
know about that.
don't put it past him. Okay.
No.
Riesling, good call. But let's talk about why it's not Torrentes. Torrentes is a fully aromatic grape, right? It is really floral. It's got a lot of phenolic bitterness. It's got the pine sol and the cilantro thing going. It's like a very strong personality, and also it's got medium plus alcohol, medium plus acid. This again has low alcohol and high acid and residual sugar. So those of you that said Riesling, yeah, good call. And let's see where we are, because we are going someplace special, my friends.
Tim,
And I've been here. You guys, I'm going to ask Evan and sorry, Lee-Man, go ahead.
Oh, I was just as this is pulling up. Do you see sweet Torrentes anyways? The RS being present, would it take Torrentes out of the mix?
You could possibly, Evan could answer that better than me, but what do you think, Evan?
No, I was going to say, Lee-Man, there are a couple of commercial Torrenteses out there that do leave a little bit of tactile residual sugar to really pop the aromatics on it. There are a couple of late harvested Torrenteses out there.
Yeah.
They're actually made in a dessert wine style. But as Tim mentioned, the acidity level, unless you're in the far, far north in Salta, they usually come off as kind of flabby because just the grape can't become ripe and have the acid to support that without acidulation. Then it tastes like baby aspirin.
All right, we have gone across the pond. We're in Germany and we are in the middle of Mosel. You're looking at the Mosel River. You are looking at the Wehlener Zonnener Vineyard, and that's where Ernie Lozen's place is. I think this is one time where all three of us, I have a feeling, have met Ernie more than once. In fact, I've been there. Maybe you've been there too. So we're in the middle of Mosel, which is one of the most gorgeous places for wine on earth. It's like somehow people decided to plant the Grand Canyon with vines about 2,000 years ago. The Wehlener Zonnener, which is this wine, we'll talk about in a second, to my knowledge, is the oldest vineyard on the planet in terms of uninterrupted cultivation. Grapes have been grown there for over 2,000 years. So let's do a crash course on this. This is from Dr. Lozen, Ernie Lozen. We'll show you a picture of Ernie in a second. He's a great guy, quite a character. 2021 vintage Wehlener Zonnener. Wehlen is the village. We say like New Yorkers are from New York. And then Zonnener translates as sundial, and that's the name of the vineyard. So it's like Burgundy in that you got two names. You got the name of a village and you got the name of the vineyard. Riesling, of course, the grape Spätlese means late harvest, hence a little bit of residual sugar. And how come it doesn't have the alcohol in there? Je suis choqué. Okay, I got to check my bottle, which says 8% alcohol. Yeah.
So the alcohol sometimes is not on the label when we get the label art,
Yeah,
but on the bottles, as Tim just showed you, we have alcohol on every single one of our bottles. So
yeah. So what can we say? So this estate is over 200 years old. It's been in the family the whole time. After Ernie's father died, he was studying wine at Geisenheim, and then he worked at various places around the world. He came back to take over the estate. They make Riesling, they make a little bit of sparkling rosé, but they make Riesling from 10 vineyards in the middle of Mosel at all different predicates. And they also make great dry wines because most of the vineyards are classified as Grosse Lage, Grand Cru. And I can say one thing about Ernie, in the Mosel, he's probably the best at making both great dry wines, the Grosses Gewächs, and the fruity style wines like this one.
And that's unusual, right, Tim? Because
yeah, it is. I remember tasting
in one or the other. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember tasting the dry wines from here 20 years ago, and they were like battery acid. And climate change unfortunately fixed that. So now the grapes get ripe enough, and they make really great dry wines. All right, so that's the Wehlener Zonnener. And Zonnener sundial, look, in the upper left, just to the left of center, is the stone sundial. That's been there for centuries. And this is a large vineyard. It faces due west. It goes up about 600 or 700 feet above the Mosel. Lots of people take fruit from it. It's Devonian slate, gray Devonian slate or blue slate. That's 150 million years old. And delicate wines. But, a wine like this, vintage like 2021, Spätlese, a great producer, etc. This is a 30-year wine, easily. And there's Ernie. He's quite a character, I will tell you.
Tim, I have a quick question for you, if you don't mind, because you said something that really resonated that I'd love for you to expand on lightly about perceiving minerality in the mouthfeel or in the palate. I think you said on the
Yeah.
roof of your mouth. Can you talk about that briefly again? Because I've never actually intellectualized that.
Well, okay, so this is just for me, and I think people,
Mhm.
different people perceive minerality differently, but it's a feeling. But we talk about the mid palate, right? Then the mid
Right.
palate for me is the most important part of any
Right.
wine. Because every wine's going to have fruit, it's going to have acid in the finish, which is usually structure. It's everything in between, and that's where all the non-fruit stuff tends to live. And here, I don't know, if you get this and you put it in, you keep it in your mouth for any length of time, the
There it
sweetness
is.
goes away, and all of a sudden you're left with acid and minerality. And the
Mhm.
minerality here kind of takes over, and it's everything. There is a little bit, the one thing I was going to mention and didn't, who mentioned it? Yeah, you didn't say it, but you said, I think who said that in the chat is, yeah, there's a little bit of TDN here. So there's a little bit of the petrol thing. Not a lot, but there's a little bit of sulfur and the TDN thing going together. So yeah,
Ernie gets around. He collaborates with winemakers in Michigan
he does.
on Riesling.
I don't think
And
he sleeps. Yeah, he's
I
an
was going to
amazing
say in
guy.
Washington as well too. What's interesting, Leman, could you go back to the picture of the Waylander Suniner vineyard for just a second? What I think is really interesting, we talk about great iconic things, and I'm sitting here having this weird sort of tangential feeling of going south on the Rhone River, looking off to the right, and you see all the names in Hermitage on
Yeah.
the hill, and then instead of this, you have the little clock, the little sun thing there. You have the La Chapelle in Hermitage here. So two of the most iconic vintage and equally steep slopes, I would suggest too. So it's kind of like the white version of Hermitage La Chapelle.
Oh,
Crazy way.
Jerry has asked a really technical question. All right, so Jerry, you asked a question, a short question with a long answer. I'm going to be Inigo Montoya and sum up. All right, so the way German wine traditionally is classified, and you should know it's changing, which is confusing everybody. So you have, you have small units that Einzellage, which are single vineyards, and then Bereichs, which are districts of vineyards, and Grosslagen, which are collection of Bereichs, and then Anbaugebiet, which are the 13 major regions, okay? A Gemeinde is a village, okay? And it's really, Gemeinden names are not really used by themselves unless it's a Grosses Gewächswein. But yeah, so that's what Gemeinde is, okay? The district of Valen. So yeah, well, Valen is not a district, it's a village, it's a place, okay? I hope that wasn't confusing, but I always hope that people won't ask a question on Germany like that, because now everybody's in a trance. Everybody wake up, it's gonna be okay.
What are they doing to it, Tim? How are they changing it now?
Oh, Madeline, don't ask that question.
Never mind. I take it back.
Because I will just say, you have German wine law, which applies to every wine made in Germany, right? So wine under that Spätlese like this means the grapes were harvested at a certain level of sugar. That's a classification. Doesn't matter where the grapes are from, which means theoretically you could have really lousy Spätlese wines. Yeah. On the second thought, there is a growers organization called the VDP, many long German words. There are only 200 members, I think, as of 2024. People get voted off the island and join every year. Okay. They have their own classification that's for dry wines based on their classified best vineyards in all 13 regions. The German government took a look at that and gave us a shot across the bow about 5 years ago saying, hey, that's really attractive. I think we're going to adopt it. Well, guess what? 2 years ago, they announced they're going to move towards the same model. And so it is in process. I don't know what's going to happen, but the Germans, yeah, let's just say they are masters of making simple things complex. Bless their hearts. Okay. All right. We need to get to wine number 4.
Yep. Here
now
we go.
For something completely different. Okay, so now the first of 3 white wines. Okay, what's important here? And I use these same 3 questions quite a bit. With it, color in red wine kind of matters, not so much in white wine. But here in blind tasting, you're looking at a red wine for depth of color. Because if it's not there, that means the thinner skin grape, that your universe just got smaller. If it's a deeper color, okay, that could be a different set of grapes. So look at the depth of color. Notice that you can see through it. That's important to register. Okay. Next, what are the important non-fruit aromas and flavors? Always, because many of the impact compounds that I talked about in the Evil Dwarves tastings, they're non-fruit aromas and flavors. And finally, pay attention to the texture of the wine, okay? Especially the quality of the tannins. How are they? Are they soft, gentle, astringent, bitter, aggressive, coarse, gritty, or whatever? And then how does that translate to the grape and the winemaking and the use of oak for that matter? Okay. That's a lot. Let's talk about the color. The color here is a solid ruby red. And I would say it's a medium ruby. Notice that the wine lightens up at the edge to a pink or a magenta or a fuchsia, if you want to get fancy. And that is to say that the wine is fairly young. And it's also from a thinner skinned grape, lighter pigmented, okay? And I have expectations about what the fruit is going to be like and the structure and everything, but I'm going to save those till the end, okay? In terms of what the wine smells like, okay. Here we go. So smell it, please. Ooh. And Evan, you were kind to me. I drew 2 really good wines. That smells really good. Okay, so I would say predominantly red fruit. You know, with red wines, I go by color of fruit, and then I get specific. So red wines, you know, in this case, predominantly red fruit, a little bit of dark fruit. Red fruit being, you know, something like bean cherry, like sweet bean cherry, not residual sugar, but ripe. And then red plum, maybe some cranberry in there to tarten things up. There's a little bit of dark fruit too. There's a little bit of dark cherry and dark plum. It's predominantly red fruit, maybe even a little strawberry, okay? For non-fruit, if you pull your nose out of the glass, there's a little bit of very pretty rose floral above, and maybe even a little lavender too, yeah? And then there's non-fruit type things. So for me, the first thing that pops is bergamot tea. It's like Earl Grey tea. So there's tea leaf. There's also some bay leaf. There's some bay laurel. What else is in there? There's a little bit of pepper and pimentone too. Chinese 5 spice, a little bit of ginger. And the ginger makes me think of oak spice. In terms of earth and mineral, there's a little like turned earth on it, maybe a little mineral. It's not a major thing on here, but there's definitely some oak. And it's a mix of used and new oak. I'd say it's probably 37 new, so 30-70 new used. And so you've got the spice working. You've also got, you know, light vanillin. And there's some oxidative qualities like walnut and pistachio, right? Which is older oak to me. One more thing in there, there's a little bit of green quality, and that green quality reminds me of stems, okay? All right, let's taste it, please. I have expectations for this wine. Okay, so, yeah. So the wine, predominantly red fruit, tartaned up quite a bit on the palate. What else? So it's now sour cherry, cranberry, maybe raspberry, little pomegranate too. And things, the dark fruit, but here they're like blackberry, that's really acidic and bright. The things that are savory, like the tea, still I can taste the floral. The lavender is stronger. Things like there's also chervil, there's bay laurel, things like that. Notice that the earth and mineral is there. It's part of the equation. But if you go back to the Riesling and see how strong the minerality is there, it's not nearly approaching there. There's more oak on the palate than the nose to me. It's not only texture, it gives it, you know, kind of a rounded, soft tannin texture, but it also, there's some light spice and it's smoke and toast more than it's, you know, things like chocolate and cocoa and things like that, okay? Structure-wise, I'm gonna taste it again. All right, so the wine is dry. The acid is medium plus. Alcohol is medium at best. And notice the tannins are medium, right? Soft tannins, really almost velvety. And the acid gives the wine a pop on the finish. Finish is long though. Very complex wine. It's very layered. And to me, it's young. And this wine in 5 to 7 years is going to be home run. Okay, so here's what we have for possibilities. We have Grenache blend. We have Sangiovese blend. We have Pinot Noir. Your choices of a place would be France for Grenache and Pinot Noir, Italy for Sangiovese, Australia for all of those, and then Oregon for Pinot Noir. And, you know, as you think about that, again, your thing, obviously non-fruit, right, that we talked about. But here, the thing that, and Evan has said this many times, structure never lies, and you got to pay attention to it, okay? So we got soft tannins, medium alcohol, medium plus acid, okay? So everybody vote. Vote early, vote often, as Evan just said, and we'll see what we have.
I think with red wines, there's always a little bit of apprehension. So I'm going to give you guys 10 more seconds to fill it in so that we can keep on time. Yep. And then Tim will see where things are going. But I can tell you early results, exit poll, Pinot Noir is leading with 75%.
Yeah, okay. So, all right, so let's count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And here we are. So yeah, some people Grenache, few people Sangiovese. So the question is, why not? Why not Grenache? Okay. Grenache, if we're going in a classic place or not, we would be either in the Southern Brown, we might be in Australia in the Barossa, someplace like that. Either way, you're going to have alcohol. You're going to have high alcohol, 14.5 probably. And you could have single variety type Grenache, which you do from Australia all the time. Usually it's mint and eucalyptus combined with that. But it's alcohol and it's rich and you've got more tannin. Especially in the Southern Rhone, same thing. But you've also got the whole savory component of pepper and what Maddie calls the Jimmy Dean factor. So, smoked meat, sanguine things, and you've got more tannin and more alcohol. It's just more of everything. Why is it on Sangiovese? It's not tannic enough. Sangiovese, grape tannins in the front of the mouth, especially, and then some oak tannins in the back, and acid, higher acid. And the wine gives a really dry, austere, acidic impression, especially when it's young, which leaves us in Pinot Noir. And then the question is, how earthy is it? And it's not too earthy. So we would need to be someplace that's not in Europe, in what we would call the artist formerly known as the New World. And so that would leave us Australia or Oregon, and some people went to Oregon, which I think is a good call. And the reason is, to me, Oregon Pinot Noir is they kind of combine the best of many worlds. They do have earth and mineral, but they have a lot of fruit that I would associate with Russian River Valley or Carneros in California. But then they have all the savory components that really make the wines layered and complex. So let's hop on Evan's jet. And then we're going to go back across the pond. And we're going to go to the West Coast.
Tim, the aromatics and Sangiovese include dried fruit too, correct?
Oh, correct. Yeah, the good point,
yeah.
Maddie. Yeah.
Yeah.
The tomato leaf and the really dusty, chalky quality, and star anise and sandalwood and things like that. And the wines are acidic and dry and tannic. Here we are. We are in the Willamette Valley. And we are at the 100 Sons Winery, right? And I think this is in Eola Amity Hills. This is a husband-wife team of Grant, I forgot his last name, Grant Coulter and Renee Santamore. And they went from California to the Willamette Valley almost 20 years ago. And Grant worked as assistant winemaker at Hammacher and then at Beaufrere for about 10 years, and then eventually became the winemaker. And then in 2015, they brought their own property, scraped together all their life savings and put it down on a 45-acre property. Unfortunately, a lot of the best vineyards were disease-ridden, and they had to replace them in 2020. So they make Pinot Noir. They make 7 different Pinot Noirs. They make a small amount of Chardonnay and then sparkling wine. And 100 Sons, by the way, is just 100 days between bud break and harvest, right? That's what it means. But I'm really impressed with this wine. I mean, one thing this guy, Grant Coulter knows, he knows texture. This wine, it's got a silky, soft texture, even for Pinot Noir, but at the same time, it's got the pop, the snap of the acidity. And like I said, in 5 to 7 years, this wine's going to be glorious, and it'll probably age 10 to 12 easily. And this is also a blend of vineyards. So the other 6 Pinot Noirs are single vineyard wines. So good stuff.
Yeah, no, I was very impressed. This was a new one to me when we all tasted it originally and put it in. But I love, to your point, it's got that sort of like snap, crackle, pop brightness to it.
Yeah.
It shows really young. I think the only thing, if I would hit it for something right now, just would be it could use a little bit more fat in the middle palate. But my experience with Pinot Noir is that it picks up over time, and just obviously if you trained at Beaufrere for that long and you've got as strong lineage as you do, you're going to be a master of this particular grape variety, and the wine speaks for itself.
I think it just needs a little food, and I think it would change the texture of the palate, but it's incredibly expressive aromatically. So this is, if I understand you correctly, it's not from one of the Willamette's districts. It's a combination.
Yeah, it's a combination of several different sources. Yeah.
It's within Eola Amity, but it's several different vineyards, of which they do vineyard designate all the others. The vineyard designates, much as I would love to put them in Master of the World, Limeng would beat me because we would go over cost, and we can't afford to do that. But if you like this wine, it's kind of like if you like somebody's village wine, maybe you want to check out one of their Premier Cru, and you would be
Mhm.
equally happy with it. But
Yeah.
So, but it is Willamette. So it's
Yeah,
still
Willamette,
within,
because they can't
yeah,
put there's sub A on it. So Ivan
got it.
Hernandez just asked, is there a way to tell that if this went through carbonic maceration? Great question, Ivan. Yeah, there is. So you think Beaujolais Village for a wine with carbonic maceration, and there's a really tutti fruity, bubblegummy, almost confected quality to the fruit that's missing here. So yeah, if you put a Beaujolais Village next to this wine, I didn't mention the stems on the palate, but they're definitely there. So that kind of cross-mogenates, but at the same time, the quality of the fruit here is not candied. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly could be semi-carbonic. I mean, oftentimes
Yeah.
when people do this, they like the idea of it, but they don't sparge the tank with carbon dioxide beforehand,
Right.
and they just start putting the grapes in. And as the grapes on the bottom get crushed, the weight of the grapes on the top breaks up, which allows the other grapes just over them to start going through carbonic maceration. Hence,
Right.
it's semi-carbonic. So you do get the stem character, you do get a little of that, and you get a little of that sort of bright pop fruit. Again, a very astute observation, but it's not as dominant. It's not, a one-trick pony the way that when you go pure carbonic, you can get that.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah,
And there they are, the dynamic duo,
yeah, absolutely. I want that name, Rene Saint-Amour. I want Saint-Amour as the last name.
Yeah.
Saint of Love. Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Well, I'm going to do this and give Madeline an ample amount of time for her wine. So, taking a look at this one, we've talked about it before. Tim, I think, did a really good job articulating the difference that the way we break down red fruit. In the world of whites, we look at citrus versus tree versus tropical versus candied versus all artificial fruits, all that. In the world of reds, it's really red, blue, and black. And reds tend to be thinner skinned grapes, cooler climate wines, etc. Black tend to be the complete opposite of that, and blue somewhere in the middle. But usually, when you look at a wine, the color will give away if it's going to be red, blue, or black fruited. Then oak, again, a part of most wines, usually plays a piece of most things unless they're intentionally avoiding oak for certain genres and styles of wine. And then we always talk about fruit, but certain wines, other elements of the wine will jump out more, and it may not be a fruit dominant wine. It could be dominated by something else. So as we look at this wine, right off the bat, again, I'm using my white background, but I'm going to hold mine down as opposed to sideways because I'm just not that good. I get a wine of moderate plus concentration. I would say the color is ruby to a slightly faded version of the same ruby on the outside. It's clean and it's clear. There's no floaters, nothing doing any weird stuff. And when I roll the glass around and look at my white color there, I am getting some light staining of the glass, which means to me that there's probably going to be some extraction. It's not completely black. Like an Australian Barossa Shiraz could be, but by the same token, it's got a little bit more pickup of pigmentation and hue on the sides of the glass than, say, Tim's Pinot Noir just had. So something to keep in mind. Everything else looks appropriate and right. Let's go ahead and smell it. And there's quite a nose on this wine as well, too, coming right off this last wine. And I want you to go back and actually smell wine 4 really quickly and smell how primary and how fruit driven it is. Now go into this wine and there's fruit there, but the fruit's not the primary thing going on here. To me, this is a much more savory elemented wine, a little bit more umami-ish type character going on there. And that's something to think about as we go through it. So what am I getting? The fruit I am getting is decidedly more red in nature. It's red, but it's not sort of fruit bombish. So I'm getting more red currant. I'm getting more red plum. There's a little bit of cherry in there. There's a little bit of red berry in there, but there's more of that sort of bigger fruit on the top. There is some dark fruit there, but it's, I think, secondary to the red fruit, more like black raspberry, maybe a little bit of cassis or black currant, again, in that same genre. There's a note of almost citrus rind here or something like that comes off me sort of like orange in a way. And then you get the florals. There's some very cool notes that sort of suggest maybe a little bit of rose, maybe a little bit of hibiscus, something like that. Pronounced tea leaf or herbal, or I think I just saw mint pop across my screen. We're in that same general genre of stuff. I wouldn't call it as strong as super duper mint or spearmint or mint, but just maybe a soft accent or something in there. A little bit of pine, maybe a little bit of thyme, maybe a kiss of rosemary, a bit of chicory. And then underneath, there's some other stuff going on there. I'm getting licorice, sort of probably more red than black. And then I get to the minerality. And this wine has a distinctive minerality to me. And again, it's sort of a stony character of more what I would call inorganic earth rather than organic earth. It's a bit leathery, shows a little bit of rusticity in its winemaking. There's definitely some whole cluster there, which I think amplifies some of the greener elements. I pick up on elements there, which is much sort of some bitterness that I'm getting, maybe from stem tannin in the nose. If there's oak here, it's older or it's larger. And not primary to the wine's personality. Let's go ahead and taste it. The wine is dry. The wine is definitely showing the elements there. The fruit character shows pretty consistent to what we said before, plums and currants and things like that. Somebody I saw, again, I'm not as good as my colleagues here, but I did see sort of leather question mark pop across there, or oxidative. And yeah, I'm getting sort of a leathery thing. I think that suggests both a combination of some larger oak used more for micro-oxygenation, which might be giving you a bit of that. And then just, again, a style of winemaking that stresses sort of a leathery sense. And maybe there's just a couple of raisins thrown in along with the fruit that's sort of giving it that particular character. The tannins on it are sort of very soft but chalky. They're there, they're present. They're more apparent than at wine 4, but they're not huge. The wine has medium plus acidity, medium to medium plus alcohol. It's lean. It's got bright acid to it, a little bit on the tart side, and again, just a bit tannic. Tasty, different, and again, sort of an umami, porcini-ish sort of character in there too. Quite intriguing, quite captivating, quite different. As far as our choices of grapes goes here, we can go Grenache and Grenache blend. Tim sort of alluded to this in the context of Rhone blends or Rhone genres of blends before. Syrah too. Syrah obviously being a bigger, more robust grape than Grenache, but similar profile when blended with those same family of grapes. You have Mencia, which is the same grape as you find called Jaén in the Dow, but primarily known in Bierzo and Ribera Sacra in Spain. Where could we be? Spain certainly could be for the Garnacha. It could be for Mencia as well too, not so much Syrah. France would really be about Grenache or Syrah and the sort of Rhonish blends. Australia, as Tim said before, they just do it all there. And yes, there's even Mencia in Australia these days. And California probably driving the other two, maybe not so much what we call Mencia there. There are a couple there.
So Evan, as people are putting their votes in, we have Ivan, as you mentioned, you saw the word oxidation come up, and Maddie is saying that she doesn't get oxidation, that leather oxidation. Is that the same thing? And is that a big element in this wine?
Not necessarily. Leathery can be an element of oxidation, but leathery is usually going to be caused more by other elements, rusticity, a little bit of Brett, some other things that might give you there. As fruit dries out, or as the wine dries out, it can get, in some people's mind, leathery. So oftentimes we get into vernacular. I suggest this has a little bit of both.
Okay. All right. Let's see where we are with the results. We have quite a mix. I wouldn't say it's quite a third, but 36% think that it's Grenache, 27 at Syrah, 27 at Mencia. You want to help people out a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing that probably keeps it away from being Grenache is it's to get Grenache ripe like that and to pull that there. One, you've got to get it ripe, and the alcohol doesn't suggest enough generosity to me. It also comes off. I mean, I guess it could be a blend as opposed to a mono variety, but it just doesn't have the richness and that sort of purity of red fruit, along with, again, the blended sort of smokier, meatier characters just aren't there. This to me more comes off more if there's elements that are non-fruit, they're more like herbal and vegetative than they are not. Syrah, you'd probably have a lot more bacon and smoke and again, the Jimmy Dean thing is, as Madeline likes to say, pepperiness, all those sorts of things, none of which you have there. And Syrah wines, unless they are super duper cool climate, which would be reeking black peppercorn, they tend to be more black fruited than they are red fruited, and this is a red fruited one. Mencia, for those of you who are getting it, that's great. I think a lot of people probably haven't had a lot of Mencia, which might be a clue as to what we're doing. And if there's any others, I'd be curious to
Mhm.
hear what
Evan,
people said.
there's a question mark on Merlot. Why not Merlot?
Merlot. Well, Merlot definitely would carry some of the herbal characters. Merlot, again, would probably be not as strongly red fruited as this. And depending on where it was in the world, there might be another element. So if you were in France and you were somewhere on, I guess, either bank, the left bank is as dominated by Merlot as anything else today, you might have more of that sort of graphite character or more of that sort of minty, again, although we did find it there, but more of a sort of mint character or bay leaf character. The tannins would be plush. These tannins to me grip a little bit, and I'm just not getting any of the things that give me sort of classic Merlot cues in this wine.
We have 72% on Europe, and Tim says it's profoundly earthly. So let's see
Yeah,
where we're going.
and we're doing that. So we are leaving Oregon. We're taking a lot. For those of you who are frequent flyers, you're collecting miles today. This is a good thing, although we're generally tending to stay in one hemisphere at least thus far. And we're leaving our friends in Oregon. We're leaving the Willamette Valley. We're leaving Eola Amity. Had a good meal, hopefully maybe at Nick's in McMinnville. And we're going yet again back to Europe. We've been doing a lot of alternating back and forth here. However, this time, rather than landing in Germany, rather than landing in France, we are landing in Spain. And we are landing specifically in the area of Castilla León in Bierzo. And this is a beautiful part of Spain. There's two areas I alluded to earlier that specialize in wines from Mencia. One would be Ribera Sacra, that's part of the area of Galicia, and then Bierzo is technically part of the Castilla León. It's a cross to me always if you had if Pinot Noir and Cabernet Franc had a child and had a cousin named Nebbiolo, that's probably what you would get here. It very much speaks to all those. There's a lot of very old vines in this area. A lot of the beauty of getting wines from Bierzo and Ribera Sacra is this is a grape that was planted a long time ago and that sort of time forgot. Two great producers in this area, one being Alvaro Palacios, whose Descendientes de Palacios is considered to be a standard bearer of that, and the other gentleman who doesn't get as much perhaps airtime is Raul Perez. And Raul Perez is a rock star. He's considered part of the Nueva España, New Spain movement. And he was one of those people that, along with Alvaro, but perhaps even more so, single-handedly rediscovered all of these great vines, neglected vines in this part of the world. And just doing a tremendous job. He makes 7 different Mencias out of this particular thing that he does. The wine's called El Rapolao, and this is one of a handful of wines he makes in the area of Valtuye, which is an area of Bierzo known for its old vines that sits particularly on hillsides. He is considered to be visionary. He was a family man. He left his own family winery in 2005. He's got the world's coolest beard of all time, and he happens to be a very loquacious and wonderful gent. And once again, this is a great variety to pay attention to in its pure or blended form. This one has a little bit of Alicante Boucher, known as Garnacha Tintorera in this part of the world, and a little bit of what we would refer to in France as Trousseau, which they call Bastardo in this part of the world and in the Douro too, although it's primarily, I want to say, about 2/3 old vine Mencia. And Raul is a really cool guy, and I think a poster child for the movement of these sort of new rock star winemakers in Spain.
I'm going to jump in because Mary just put a lovely comment in the chat, thanking you for including this. But in case you have some folks who are actively practicing for blind tastings, it isn't like tomorrow you're going to experience Mencia in exams. But what I love about these kits is that there's always 1 or 2 wines that are discovery wines, just to bring to our attention the quality potential of certain that haven't maybe moved into what we would call the classic zone.
Yeah, and one of the things we try and do, of course, at Master of the World is when we're doing that, we try and pick wines that we believe to be really exemplary of what they are. So not to say you're ever going to get a Mencia in a blind tasting or anything, but if you're trying to familiarize yourself with Mencia, as Madeline would say, file this one upstairs and use it as a benchmark by which you would judge other wines against.
Mhm. All right.
Maddie, you got 15.
That's amazing.
You want to keep going, Evan? I don't know what to do with 15 minutes. Seriously, I'm confused. I'm used to 5. So, but thank you. Okie dokie. I will tiptoe through the tulips. Here we go. We're looking at wine number 6. Oh, what are our little questions up here? Qualifying the tannins. And I think that's important because a wine can actually have high tannins that are finely grained, or medium plus tannins that are astringent. Hold that thought. And where this comes into play isn't because we're trying to be precious. It really helps with deductive reasoning, especially if you're stymied and you're praying to the structural elements and the color to set you free, right? Per usual, thank you, Tim. Important non-fruit aromas, a term that I've learned to use, and I think it's very important in this wine. And the impression of both inorganic and organic minerality, meaning earthiness. And again, not unlike Chablis, wine number 1, and go back to it, warmed up if you want to remind yourself of inorganic minerality. There it is, and it's in the wine number 3, the Riesling too, that though getting that RS on your palate when you're about to hit a bigger red can be a little tricky, but you can live dangerously. You can have non-European wines that have, even aggressive expressions of organic and inorganic earth. So that stuff is not just it doesn't belong just to Europe. Let's put it that way. Okay. I love color in reds because it really, again, it's this thing that, especially if you're tied up in knots deductively on an initial conclusion, and you've got a little laundry list of grape varieties, and you look at it and it's staining the glass, and you're going, hello, this doesn't look like Pinot Noir or Grenache or Gamay. That can be wildly helpful, right? So what I've got here is a deep ruby. I can barely see through it. I can a little bit. And this is something that's important to me in terms of assessing relative age. That ruby, the density of it, holds its hue and its concentration almost to the very rim. So that's telegraphing maybe smaller, thicker skin grape variety over varieties, because we can include blends, right? That seem to be in a young state because they hold their hue to the rim. There's not even a hint of yellow or amber or orange in there. And as I turn it, it is painting my glass. So, we've got a significant amount of color going on. And in terms of how it moves in the glass and how the legs are expressing themselves, it appears to be medium full in body, aka extract and or alcohol. Aromatically, I love thinking I'm putting my seatbelt on. Can't wait to see how it's going to smell right now. Because, whoa, beautiful. Because wines change in the glass over the period of an hour and a half, right? I mean, it's not unlike talking to people at a dinner party. Sometimes they're chatty and sometimes they just clam up and pay attention to the artichoke. So let's see what this guy's doing. Just beautiful expression of fruit. And, perfectly ripe. And for me, just on the nose, one sniff, it's this beautiful combination of red, blue, and black fruit, with blue pushing forward, I think, a little bit. So how am I going to define it? God, it's pretty. But I will say one thing before I define the fruits. Right melted in to the fruit expression is lavender and violet. Fresh flowers. I think both, well, and maybe even a little dried, maybe in a little potpourri. So they're melted into the fruit element, which is perfectly ripe. As I said, I think blue leads, and we're talking what? Blueberry. I'm not really that familiar with boysenberry, but we do a lot of blueberries here in Michigan. And again, perfectly ripe. Black fruit to me is coming up secondary as, take your pick, black plum probably, and red plum as well. So I wouldn't say tart red fruit, maybe a little bit of sour cherry, red and black, but I'm going to be curious to see what we get on the palate. But I just find the perfume of that fruit with blueberry leading is glorious, and the floral expression. There is an earthiness to this wine that is not strong but present, maybe a little bit of turned earth and also a rocky quality. Herbs are not pushy, but I will say I'm obsessed with purple basil, by the way, because it's got a different expression than sweet basil. I dry purple basil and then put it in all my salads. I love it. Maybe a little bit of oregano, but also aromatically, you can call it anise if you want, but for me, it's licorice, both red and black, and I love the smell of that. There is oak on this wine, and actually I will tell you, when I first poured it, it kind of whipped my head back a little bit, but I just think it was sitting on it for a moment because it's really integrated. Right now, aromatically, the oak is very, very integrated. It's probably a combination of new and used, and there's just a little kiss of vanilla, or what I like to call the Starbucks smell, you know, coconut, you know, mocha, blah, blah, blah. That's working very well with the fruit expression. I wouldn't call this nose complex. I would call it young but gorgeous. And I'm not simplifying the wine by making that comment. I just think it's at the early end of its life's trajectory. On the palate,
Maddie, do you feel that there's some fermented aromas? Ivan brought up fermented aromas.
I'm not sure what he means. I don't think so. Maybe one of my colleagues, if they perceive it, can speak up, but hold that thought and we can discuss it after we address the palate. I think the palate's a little bit of a surprise because it goes from that beautiful round florality with the kiss of oak and ripe fruit to a somewhat more serious expression. I think it turns darker fruit on the palate. There's a little bit more of a tart expression on the palate. I often think with wines like this that if a strawberry could be black, that's what this is, a black strawberry, or maybe red and black cherries. Alcohol is coming off medium plus, but in a positive way. It's giving the wine heft on the palate. It's giving the wine mouthfeel. The acidity is absolutely more than sufficient, so medium plus. So the acid and the tannin are beautifully balanced. I'm going to take one more sip because I want to talk about the quality of the tannins. Delicious. Whoa. So there's plenty of tannin in this wine. So there are medium plus tannins. However, their expression is what I would call gently drying. They are not harsh. They are not austere. They definitely change the texture of my tongue and the roof of my mouth and my lips. So we've got both fruit and I think mostly fruit tannins, not so many wood tannins, but maybe Tim can clarify this momentarily. The wine is quite dry, but the tannins aren't hard enough to shut the flavor down. So I would not call these hard tannins, though they are considerable. And in double checking everything, flowers on the palate, though they're taking a secondary or tertiary place and maybe a little bit more potpourri dried. You know, as I mentioned, moving into black fruit land, more black raspberry, black plum, but the blue is still there, but the red has receded, a little more tart fruit. There's the licorice, black licorice. I grew up in Greece, so we didn't have black licorice. So when I discovered it in the United States, it's like wildly exotic to me. The oak expression on the palate, I think, is more neutral than it was aromatically. So I think this is mixed wood, and I don't think there's a lot of new oak. And I'm gonna, you guys can start voting if you want to. The finish is a little short, but that is not a criticism of the wine. I think it's a young, rich red wine whose length simply hasn't expressed itself yet. Because often the wines will open up as they age aromatically, then on the palate, and then on the finish. But I think the punchlines with this wine are the quality of the tannins, the different kinds of fruit, the florality. But it's ripe. And it's definitely come from a growing region that's getting plenty of sunshine. So what do we have? Corvina blend, which would express itself in Italy in the form of Valpolicella / Amarone. And you would have a dried fruit element to a wine like that. So hold that thought. Malbec blend or Merlot blend. So two Bordelaise varieties. You know, when we're looking at the growing regions, Malbec, you know, with rare exception, is not really present in Bordeaux in any strong sense, though it's still in Cahors, where it was called Malbec Bad Mouth. Isn't that a terrible name? It's like Sinomavro, sour black in northern Greece. But you know, has found its like, you know, spiritual home in Argentina at high altitudes. And then Merlot, which can certainly do a good job everywhere, but is probably its most classic in California and France. And if we're talking about Merlot, at least for me, we're talking about more red fruit dominant and also possibly similar tannin structure. So there you have it.
Launch the results here so you could see.
Ooh, a lot of people are weighing into Corvina and Italy. Cool.
Yeah.
Malbec edges ahead at 45%. Who's saying, and I want to know what the other is. Can somebody tell me, is it in the chat room?
Zinfandel.
Oh, Zinfandel. So now that's a very interesting call because Zin will often have, you know, perfectly ripe, but also moving into dried fruit. And it's what I call the you know, the sort of a bramble bush character, like you took the whole, you know, vine and jammed it into the bottle where you get a really strong stemmy quality. And also with Zin, you're going to get that combination of ripe and tart because the grapes don't ripen evenly on the cluster. You know, we didn't really talk about earth much. We talked about it a little bit, but I don't think it dominates in this wine. So I'm very curious when we get to the discussion, especially talking about Corvina, if you're getting dried fruit elements, and if you're actually getting, frankly, a little residual sugar as well. So shall we get on our plane? The aisle seat's mine. Get out of the way, guys. I am lightly claustrophobic, so I like being able to get up.
We did have about 66% in the non-Europe and about, you know, 36% actually in the Europe. What do you think of that call as we're trying
66% in Europe?
in non-Europe?
In non-Europe. But I mean, I think there is an earthy element to this wine, and I described it both inorganic and organic, but I don't think it dominates. I don't think it leads the wine. And, you know, here we are going to South America. We are going to Mendoza. We are going to central Mendoza. We are going to a relatively, you know, well, I really can't call it a, you know, it's young-ish winery that's got some visionary folks behind it. They bought over 500 acres in Luján de Cuyo. Is that how I pronounce it, Evan, or am I saying it wrong?
Luján de Cuyo and Luján de Cuyo.
And my little iPhone
right.
that now is up to 25,000 pictures. I took a picture of it when I was there because I was so excited to see the place name. So when you're in Mendoza, which you know, produces what, over 75% of Argentina's wine, but certainly not exclusively. We're in big time Malbec land. We are, Luján de Cuyo is a little bit further north, and then you've got the Uco Valley a little further south and west, but, you know, with a chunk higher altitude. It's certainly, you know, Uco is sexier at the moment because, you know, super high elevation always sounds wonderful, but you're still, even in Luján de Cuyo, you're talking, you know, 3,000 feet above sea level. Have a nice day. It's high desert, right? It doesn't matter where you are. And when I look at, I mean, these look like glamour shots, and they're not. They're so cool. When I was there, you know, what comes home very quickly is you've got the purest runoff from the Andes, which is what they use to irrigate with. You've also got significant winds, so you don't have fungal issues up here. You also don't have an issue getting ripe because you have unbelievable ultraviolet light, and you've got some of their best vineyards, which are netted or tented even, you know, to protect them. I have to describe Las Hormigas because it's just too cool for words. It is a name that means the ants, right? Because then they were planting these vineyards in 1996, and they had a big problem with local ant colonies that love to wipe out the tender young plants. But you know what? The Argentines really respected them. And they have a term, trabajo de hormigas, or a job for ants, meaning humble, patient, and dedicated work. So they named the winery with respect to the ants, which I think is just delightful. What are we talking about here in terms of specifics of this wine? We're talking about, they claim no new oak, which is interesting to me. They're talking about cement for the most part, or completely neutral barrels, and they have moved to that relatively recently. They claim to use untoasted oak foudre because they want the fruit to dominate. What vintage is this guy? This is 2022, so they probably started doing that for this vintage. I think the thing to memorize here are the punchlines of Argentine Malbec, which I don't think are that complex, but especially if you're struggling in blind tasting with Malbec, Cabernet Sauvignon, right? Not so much Cab Franc, because that's got a really specific aromatic, and Merlot. What are the takeaways? And they're all in this wine. Deep purple, even deeper than this, more opaque than this. Though it's one of the few wines where blueberry pushes its way forward. That florality, it's very different than, say, the flowers in Barolo, but it's just this beautiful whiff of dark flowers, lavender and violets, and also the quality of the tannins. That's why I really wanted to push that home. Drying, but smooth. There's a roundness to this wine that I think is terrific. And I think, the minerality is no bloody surprise. You're in an area that you're not growing tomatoes up there. You've got cactus, right?